Well, to start with, I think that they have not just wronged Fuaga, they've wronged Nigeria. Never heard the other side, in line with the provisions of the Constitution, Section 36. In the other bread, you disobeyed flagrantly a court order, and then you turn around to say, oh, the judiciary is not strong enough, the judiciary should improve, when we are the very ones, by this behavior, undermining judicial institutions in this country. Honestly, if I were the judge and the appropriate applications are made before me, I will go very far to make that point strong. Now let's come back to the rules. They made so much noise about the rules. We wrote these rules, or we
60, Rule 40,
we reviewed,
Rule 20. There are a few sections of.
We reviewed the rules in 1999. I was the first to lay down the reviewed rules. It was what I laid that I sent to the Senate for them to use. It's not changed. They just changed, increased committees, a few here.
Yesterday, an institution that is supposed to stand tall was at its lowest ebb. Yesterday, we had the Senate violate a court order because they wanted to nail Senator Natasha Akpabio. Yesterday, we saw a Senate Ethics Committee that didn't hear from the side of the dramatis personnel in all of this drama, but went ahead to make its conclusion based on other people they spoke to without the dramatis personnel being there. And they reached a verdict of suspension. Yesterday, we saw a Senate that tried to sidestep a very important issue as regards the sexual harassment case raised against the Senate President, Senator Akpabio. Yesterday, we saw high-handedness, political brigandage. Yesterday...
Hello, wonderful followers and subscribers of Holy Ghost Son. I hope this video finds you well. Guys, you are about to watch a video of Arise TV where Rufai Oseni, Abiola, and Dr. Ruben Abati, these guys, they finish Akpabio. They finish Senate. Please, I beg you, you got to watch this video. They even cited previous cases where court order was able to solve suspension. But in the case of Natasha, they flagrantly, disobey court order and prove that they themselves they are misogynist. Misogynist, somebody, guys, men who are against the women folks. You understand? Now, before you watch that, I want to show you a video of the senator that wrote the order, right? The order they were quoting that that Natasha disobeyed. You understand? The rule they say broke. The order they kept quoting. The senator that wrote it in 1999 appear on China's TV, and he said that Akpabio and his gang they've sinned against Nigerians. Please watch the short video. After that, take your time, get a popcorn, get a drink, and listen to Rufai Oseni, Akpabio, and Dr. Ruben Abati. Please do me a favor, ensure you share this video. Let the world see this video about to watch. Thanks and God bless. And don't forget to give it a thumbs up.
This injustice will not be sustained. The pursuit for justice.
That's how it went today, but let's get some legal perspective to it and some experience of the National Assembly operations. I'm being joined by a former federal lawmaker and senior advocate of Nigeria, Honorable Wes Idauso is live for us here in our studio. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time tonight, but give us an understanding. Has the Senate done anything wrong against Senator Akpabio?
Well, to start with, I think that they have not just wronged Fuaga, they've wronged Nigeria. The reason is simple. We all know that a few days ago, maybe 2 days ago or so, the court order was served on the Senate of Nigeria. The committee in charge of ethics and so on and so forth. And that there was proof of service. I mean, this was flying on the social media and everyone saw it. They got a substituted order to serve on the Senate through the office of the clerk. This was done. And then, in spite of this, you didn't sit down, you didn't rush a committee report, and then the person who is accused and who was likely to suffer from a suspension order was not even present. And so, in one breath, there was no fair hearing. You never heard the other side, in line with the provisions of the Constitution, Section 36. In the other breath, you disobeyed flagrantly a court order, and then you turn around to say, oh, the judiciary is not strong enough, the judiciary should improve, when we are the very ones, by this behavior, undermining judicial institutions in this country. Honestly, if I were the judge and the appropriate applications are made before me, I will go very far to make that point strong. Now let's come back to the rules. They made so much noise about the rules. We wrote these rules, or
Rule
we
60,
reviewed.
Rule 40,
We reviewed.
Rule 20. There are a few sections of.
We reviewed the rules in 1999. I was the first to lay down the reviewed rules. It was what I laid that I sent to the Senate for them to use. It's not changed. They just changed, increased committees, a few here and there. Now, the Senate President allocates the seat. The dispute arose from the allocation of seat. Now, once it is Senate President that allocates a seat and a senator complains about a right to a seat, it's a privilege, because the right to be in the Senate is by election and a certificate of return. Do not forget, you and I cannot go there. So once he raises that point, it is a duty under Order 10, the famous Order 10 she was shouting about, of the presiding officer, to have suspended all other matters. I consider that a very serious issue, and taking her complaint and make a formal ruling. But if you watch the proceedings on that day, as the distinguished senator was shouting Order 10, Order 10, I already heard the presiding officer talking about prepare for suspension. Review the tape. We've seen it. You were already preparing her for suspension even before you.
So was it fake accompli?
Oh yeah, it was completely.
They decided our fate even long before the ethics committee was even.
It was predetermined. And then beyond that, the question was, at the time they went to court, the issue was that there was a thinking, a suspicion that she might be suspended. That was why she went to court. If you don't stop them, they will do it. And then they did it in spite of receiving the order. Now, I said to them, they were wrong. Section 4, subsection 8 of the Constitution is clear. In the conduct of his legislative powers and duties, their conduct shall be subject to the judiciary.
So you can actually, another arm of government can stop the activities of another arm of government.
Look, can I just take it briefly?
So the judiciary, the court can stop the activities that goes on in the chamber. I imagine that the activities within the chamber, there is some level of immunity to the procedure and the activities of lawmakers within the chamber.
As long as the activities do not obstruct the due process of law. I mean, once the Senate is in session, it is carrying out legislative business. Whether it is about a seat, whether it's about a breach of privilege, whether it is about passing the law, whether it's about passing a motion, it's all brought down legislative privilege. And so when the Constitution of Nigeria says that the National Assembly's duties shall be subject to the jurisdiction of the courts, shall, it means it. And that's why they run to court each time they are suspended. Chinda was there. Ndume was there.
And I was going to reference the case of Omar Agege. It was a rested case in the court.
Yes.
The case of Ali Ndume. They all went to court.
Dino Melaye.
Yes. These are cases that have been decided by our
correct
court. In that case, there is an underlying factor that the courts
have talked about. For example, most courts are of the view that you can't suspend a sitting senator or lawmaker of any legislative body for more than 14 days, interpreting the Legislative Powers and Privileges Act.
But so there is an establishment that the Senate or the National Assembly, when there is a quorum and there is a sitting, can suspend one of their own.
Oh,
established,
definitely.
By their own rules.
Definitely.
But in the court, as at the famous case of Senator Omar Agege, that you cannot suspend for more than 14 days.
Correct. And not only that, you can also not suspend without hearing the other party. That was a violation.
Nemo Judas
in Kazaswa. You know that because the Senate President who allocates the seat, and which was the course of action in all of this.
Was Senator Uduaghan Akpabio Uduaghan did not make herself available to the ethics committee.
Well, the point will be whether or not she was in court, because I understand she filed an action and she was probably present in court. So it will also depend whether there was a proving means of proof of service on her. Because if you have a fear about you being endangered by a given institution and you approach the appropriate institution for redress, you are most likely to pursue the processes to the attention of the prosecuting institution.
But let me ask you this fundamental question. And the women folk, the gender, the female gender, has been under critical spotlight in politics, in this case of Senator Natasha Akpabio Uduaghan. As a former lawmaker, if this kind of case comes up, what do you think is best? Because as anyone that is above the age of 50 and is in politics and is in governance and is in leadership, will assume some level of reasoning and wisdom in handling this kind of matter.
Yeah.
Don't forget that Senator Akpabio is a very good friend to Chief Emmanuel Uduaghan, the husband to Senator Akpabio Uduaghan. There is a family connection.
Yeah.
There is a friendship that is is in question here. Do you think this matter could have been handled in a better way?
Oh, definitely, because the Senate President is the interpreter of their rules. So in interpreting the rules, you have two obligations. You have to be compassionate, and at the same time, you have to be humanistic. Remember, we are dealing with human beings. And then you must recognize that the world recognizes the endangered nature of female politicians. And that's why you've had affirmative action, you've had the Beijing Declaration. All of this is...
Does it look like Senator Natasha Akpabio Uduaghan stepped out of the line? If there is a rule that you cannot speak if you're not sitting on your chair, even when you have a legitimate reason to protest, and there are cases that are, the presiding officer himself in the 8th Assembly, we showed a video of how he agitated when he sat in a place where there was no microphone. So he agitated. But shouldn't she have also obeyed first by sitting in the place and then protest later? The case of, say, obey the rules that were made by your own colleagues. Agree to.
No, but don't forget that even in the reallocation of seats, there is a notification. I am aware that text messages are either sent or a publication done. So if you didn't get any and you suddenly come to the Senate on that day, and some para-legislative staff I'd say, no, man, you can't stay here. This is where you are going to sit. As a member of the Senate, you are not a slave. Remember that. Part of what qualifies you to remain in the Senate is that you were elected. So the right to speak as a senator is guaranteed. The right to protest is guaranteed. So you cannot be talking about sitting on the seat which is the subject of action.
We've seen 3 months suspension. We've seen a few months suspension, but this 6 months. What a lot of Nigerians might not know tonight is that it's not 6 calendar months. It is 6 legislative sitting months, days that we're counting. Meaning that almost 8 months or 9 months.
Oh yeah, it will extend far beyond.
She will be out of work.
Far beyond the calendar month.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think what she will be doing, I mean what that means is that a state of the Federal Republic, Kogi State, will be denied the right to equality of representation in the Senate. The Senate is a special body. It's made up of 3 senators per state, regardless of the size of the state. And there's a reason for that. So each time this happens, you deny Kogi State the right to a vote. And so I think that regardless of the political parties to which she may belong, the government of Kogi State should intervene and express a reservation, because it may come to a point where one vote will matter and Natasha will not be there. And that's key. It's key. So that's why it's not just about Natasha. It's about whether or not Kogi State, as a component state of the Federation of Nigeria, is denied a senatorial vote.
How damaging is this for the reputation of the Senate under Akpabio?
Well, I think the most damaging is the blazing disobedience of court order. It is very untenable for a lawmaking body.
But there are very senior lawyers there. You have the Senate President, who is a lawyer. You have the majority leader, who is also a very respected senior lawyer. And do you think they would have flagrantly disobeyed court orders if they probably had considered something else that you are not saying? Let us say.
Well, you know, the truth is, power is an aphrodisiac. Legislation and the business of legislation it smells of power. So sometimes they may oversight the law in the sense that they are dealing with primary interests which are also underlined politically, whether we like it or not. And politics is about who gets what, how, and when. So if they had made up their mind to suspend this senator, nothing else for them will matter, not even a court order. So their seniority in law will probably not be counted on this occasion. But for us who are outside, who are observing, who are practicing, we will not fail to say no. Before many of them, we were there. So we would tell
Can this be corrected?
Well, for me, the way to correct it is there are two ways. One, to hold a special session and rescind their decision, or the courts to step in and order and not suspend the senator because it was done in flagrant disobedience. So once the court lawyers file the appropriate action, we know that a mandatory injunction can do this, and I urge these lawyers and our lawyers to take the move, make the move.
Can Akpabio fix what has come like a dent on his leadership of the Senate?
Well, that may take some time, but it can carry out immediate emergency repairs, which would be do the right things, win some folks, and then hope over the period, make some good laws for the good governance of our country, work on some real nice policies, maybe the country.
A lot of women are not happy with him.
It's understandable, because it takes a woman such a long journey to get to the Senate. How many are there?
All right. Honorable Wesley, so for some good reasons, thank you so much.
Right. I don't know if we would say that this sums up the case that we've been following in the last few weeks or just begins a new setup. Of course, you've seen the main report, as Omo has said, that Senator Natasha has been given a 6-month suspension as recommended by the Senate Ethics Committee. Your take on this story? Fine.
Yesterday, democracy went on holiday. Travesty replaced it. That's what happened yesterday. Yesterday, an institution that is supposed to stand tall was at its lowest ebb. Yesterday, we had the Senate violate a court order because they wanted to nail Senator Natasha Akpabio. Yesterday, we saw a Senate Ethics Committee that didn't hear from the side of the dramatis personae in all of this drama, but went ahead to make its conclusion based on other people they spoke to without the dramatis personae being there. And they reached a verdict of suspension. Yesterday, we saw a Senate that tried to sidestep a very important issue as regards the sexual harassment case raised against the Senate President, Senator Akpabio. Yesterday, we saw high-handedness, political brigandage. Yesterday, I wept for my democracy. The same democracy patriots like M.K. Abiola fought for and laid their lives for. But I hope at some point, Nigerians will rise up and will weep no more. Anyway, there's a background to all of this. All we are saying, let investigations be held as regards the sexual harassment case. We saw the ethics committee that made its deposition, but what the ethics committee failed to realize from the video we all watched, that there was actually an altercation. It wasn't just only Natasha, Senator Natasha Akpabio, speaking to the Senate President. He spoke back. He even threatened suspension while the altercation was going on. So it wasn't mute every step of the way. But obviously, if you want to call somebody a bad name and bury him, you look for ways to do that quickly. Anyway, what's the historical antecedents? The people that have been suspended by the Senate that went to court, the court overturned those suspensions, and the Senate did not pursue those cases any longer. Ombakige comes to mind, Pundume comes to mind. The Senate too will have to tell us why, despite a court injunction saying, let's stop the process, they went ahead to still do a process that they brought forward just to be able to nail Senator Natasha Akpabio. Like she says, this injustice will not be sustained. Definitely the fight is on, but I weep for Nigeria.
Okay, I think the more serious issues, in my view, will seem to be that Look, there are substantive issues that we can talk about. Yesterday, we had two persons here, Kingdom Okere and Maxwell Opara, both lawyers. While I was giving a summary of their submissions, I said both of them are dealt largely with the procedural and adjectival issues within the province of law in this particular case. It will appear that the Senate of the Federal Republic, the Committee on Public Petitions, Ethics and Privileges, has taken the technical procedural route to say that if you are a member of an organization, an institution, you are bound by the rules of that organization. There are certain things you are not allowed to do, and no one individual can be greater than the institution, because the sum of the integrity of that institution is the collective commitment of the members to those principles guiding that institution. And it was in that regard, as I said, in many respects, Senator Napoti Uduaha we seem to have violated some rules of, power, some laws of power, as defined in 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. But that's not the big issue here. The big issue is that I hope the parties involved will learn their lessons. If you look at the declaration by the Senate committee, very high-handed, she's not to be seen anywhere near the Senate premises. In fact, the only thing they didn't do was that they didn't define the radius to say we must not see you within this radius around the National Assembly. Our aides would not, enjoy any privileges. She herself will have a security persons involved. She will be on suspension for 6 months. 6 months by their calendar. Half of the time they are sleeping, half of the time they are on recess. That would be like 1 year. So what does that say about our official function as the representative of the people of Kogi Central, who are the ones who are going to suffer at the end of the day because of this emphasis on drama, on theater, on salacious, representations to the Nigerian public. Now, beyond that also, we had members of even that Senate laughing at her. The two persons sitting next to her, as she was packing her things, they put off her microphone, they laughed at her. She said that this injustice will not be sustainable. Okay, that remains to be seen. And this will raise questions about, how the Senate goes about its business. But beyond all those details, all the melodramatic things that people will say in that regard, and about what the law says or about what the procedure has been, will be key issues, fundamental issues that have come up. One, about misogyny. I think there's something we teach students when we teach tragedy and other tragic forms. That was the title of the course in those days. Is that a tragic hero can win in losing. And I think that in the case of Akpabio Uduaha senator, if you can describe her as a tragic hero, not a villain, she may have won in certain regards in foregrounding certain basic issues about misogyny in our system, about women representation in politics, about also sexual harassment, whether it has improved or not, that has been thrown out into the public domain. The plight of women in politics, all of these issues will be debated, even by persons who do not know the truth, who do not have the details, and who do not have, what it takes to even do the analysis. Finally, I think that beyond all of this drama, whatever they decide at the end of the day, whether they take Senator Ojiu's or Kalu's suggestion that there should be empathy and that if she apologizes, she should be forgiven, I think, well, if she apologizes, that will amount to utter humiliation. But that's up to her. If she apologizes or not, is to restore confidence in that National Assembly. We cannot afford to have a National Assembly that is dedicated to consideration of frivolities and impurities. The public today, my own assessment, I may be wrong, will seem to be losing confidence in the National Assembly. If they are not saying one man wants to fight at a sex toy shop It will be that, some people are constituting themselves into comedians, or there is unending melodrama, or it is that some women are, using too much pancake. This is supposed to be a very serious institution. We need to remind ourselves. And the members of that assembly need to restore confidence in that assembly. We want to hear debates, as Mr. Peter Obi has argued, about serious issues of governance that will move this country forward. Not issues about this woman is seductive, this one has 4 wives, I slept in Obajana's cement factory. Is that place a hotel? Look, all these things, they are just basic distractions. And I think that the members of the National Assembly, both the Red Chamber and the Green Chamber, should be well advised to conduct themselves as serious-minded people. I don't like sitting down here, discussing frivolities, discussing fluffy stuff.
All right. Yeah, it's been a very interesting past few days. But now we've seen what seems to be a conclusion, but I believe that it's just the beginning of something new. And I think very appropriately said that the Senate is, as an institution, is under the eyes or the radar of a lot of Nigerians, especially with regards to confidence and trust in the institution to be taken seriously. Yesterday, like I said, would have proven an opportunity for the Senate to at least begin to build the confidence in people that it is an institution that follows due process and respects the rule of law. Unfortunately, in many instances, or in many things that happened yesterday, they eroded further the trust of people in the institution. Number one was the way the procedure was done. We had talked about this at length yesterday, even with our guests, around the implications of having a court order to stop the proceedings, at least in the interim, and how that was ignored. We talked about the fact that Senator Natasha Akpabio, in respect of that court order, refused to present herself to the committee, and despite that, the process seemed to have been expedited, and the committee found her guilty on all counts. Number three was that she was seated in the chambers yesterday. And we saw yesterday, for those who watched the live proceedings, which was aired yesterday on Arise TV, we saw how each of the different senators, all men, I must say, were recognized in the House, in the chambers, and were allowed to speak. But she wasn't recognized, and she wasn't allowed to defend herself. So even if she didn't go to the Senate committee, appear before the Senate committee, that was an opportunity for Nigerians to see that at least she was giving a voice in the matter. You cannot be judged or brought before a panel and your voice is not heard at all to consider, even if it's just for the optics. Now, talking about optics, something else that a number of people challenged was the fact that the Senate president, who is a principal actor in all of this, was the judge and jury in his own case. He was the one who presided, despite the calls by notable Nigerians that in the way that the president of the 8th Assembly had done to recuse himself, even if it's just for the optics. And this is why, for some people, it seemed like almost a disregard of the voices of the Nigerian people. And haven't we seen that a number of times when processes happen, not just at the National Assembly, but even in the State House of Assembly? Remember, I talked about how in Lagos State, the people were just onlookers and just viewers as the shows played out without the consideration of the constituents that they sit there on the mandate on which they sit in the chambers to represent. So that was quite unfortunate. But what I would say is that as we continue to take on this matter, is that I keep emphasizing the fact that when it comes to women, now we have one less woman out of the 4 women in the Senate, at least if the suspension goes through. It means we now have only 3 voices of women in the House, in the chambers. Second of all is that the Kogi Central voices has been silenced. And then we then talk about the legality of that, especially citing the case of Omar Agege, where the court ruled that even if the chambers of Senate was meant to suspend, they cannot suspend beyond 14 days. That's another thing that would be looked into in terms of the legality of that pronounced suspension. The final thing I would say is that, yes, people might say that, oh, she lost yesterday, that's Senator Akpabio, but sometimes you lose the battle to win the war. And I believe that this has opened a conversation afresh of women in politics, of gender equity in Nigeria, of how women are perceived. And sometimes when we look at a situation like that, she spoke up for a lot of girls and women who could identify with her story, who didn't even have the opportunity to have a voice when this similar incident or allegations were made, where you are asked to keep quiet or you're victimized because of your position or a stance on a particular matter. So I do believe that this has just opened broader conversation with the Senate. If this matter had been handled better, would have been able to stall, or at least restore the confidence of Nigerians in the institution.